spreading the disease that is my
disease is a good word. Disease is a good word for it.
My I don't know what I'd call it. Disorderly conduct. What about you, Ted?
It was good. I had another weekend in Richmond, traveling down, seeing the in-laws. And we went to the Kickers game on Saturday. It was not fun. The Jägermeister Cup game, 2-0 game. People throwing beer on opposing players, which don't do that, guys. But again, also, I don't know. I don't know if USL needs to do something about it, but when opposing teams score and then they come and they like celebrate for us and they're also in front of us, and I'm not saying like the beer throwing is good, but I'm saying like the excessiveness of which some of the celebration was going on. Like it's supposed to be, but hey, maybe that's soccer. I don't know. I'm not condoning the beer throwing at all. I'm not condoning and saying yes, maybe they deserved it. They didn't deserve it. Though I think they all had a good laugh about it, which was kind of funny.
Ted's beer whataboutism. Well, they shouldn't celebrate so hard in front of us.
No, but
they kind of deserve it.
People should not be throwing beer.
No, it is cheaper at City Stadium, so that makes it a little more economical than at Audi Field to be doing that kind of thing.
The only time I got really upset, I think it was a Forward Madison Richmond game, and it was after the game. So the game is over, and I think Forward Madison had won, and then. There was a former Richmond player who came over, which was fine. He was certainly welcome. And then these two other guys just kind of went and just stood in front of the fan base for no reason whatsoever. And it literally made absolute negative sense that they would do that, or that they would even be allowed to do that personally. So that's the only one that kind of hit me as like, come on. All right, the game's over. Get to your bus. Go do your celebrating. Get back on a flight back to Madison. You beat us. Congrats. Have a nice day. That's the only one I'll say was maybe a little bit. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about our. Well, you know what? We're not gonna mention the Celtic game. It's a friendly, but back-to-back wins, baby. DC United 3-2 victories over Minnesota United. That game feels like, considering the worlds and news events that have been taking place over the past weekend, feels like a long time ago. But it was just last Wednesday. A wild and frankly unexpected. 3-2 victory for Minnesota United for DC United over Minnesota United. John, let's give me some of your how much do we read into this game? Because I have some thoughts of I don't think there's much to read into this game. This was a case of teams played bad defense on certain occasions, and it just so happened that we played a team that made 3 bad defensive mistakes, and we only made 2 bad defensive mistakes. So, kind of how I thought about that game.
Yeah, I don't feel like this is the beginning of a new era for DC United. This is sort of like, to your point, a game in which Christian Benteke dribbles the whole defense and scores with his feet twice in one game. Unlikely to repeat that. That's a bit of a I don't want to say freak occurrence, but unusual occurrence. Yeah, I don't know. It's great that it happened. It's great that the team was able to win on the road, which they've only done, I believe, one other time this year. I think that's correct. And I think we had such a long streak of disappointment that we were not. The whole thing about MLS is that anything can happen at any time and any team can make a run. But for quite a while, we weren't winning the coin flip. We were just getting tails over and over and over and over again. So we had a little bit of luck turn around here. I think it'll be interesting to see if Leagues Cup sort of slows the momentum at all, if there was momentum there. I'm not counting the Celtic game, which we'll talk about in a minute. Couldn't come at maybe a worse time. I think a lot of people were saying that. They're like, oh, good. Our first small run of good form, and now we're going to play games that don't count towards getting to the playoffs. I think great to have Christian Benteke back on the score sheet. That's for sure. Particularly since Arango is, I think, out for 4 games. This is his chance to creep up the leaderboard.
4 games. So he was out last weekend. So that's 1 league game. He is out for the All-Star game. That counts as one of his games. And then he's out for the 2 Leagues Cup games. So he will be back. He will be back to start the return for the MLS season. But I think it'll still. I think Benteke had kind of fallen off a little bit. It was good to see him back. He remains. His wind header against Nashville sets up the tying goal. In this game, he is a part of all 3 goals. He, of course, scores the first one. Again, bad defensive play, but, he makes the most of the finish. And I think that is something that's been a criticism of him. Maybe not making the most of, he's certainly dominant in the air, dominant in a lot of areas, but just not a player who's made the most of some of his finishes sort of on the ground. And he makes the most of both goals. And then, of course, the tying goal, where we thought, oh man, we rescued a point from this one. That's good. Was again an assisted header, I think, off a set piece again. So so it's certainly it's good to see him get back to sort of that dominant ways. I think maybe there was some discussion, after his red card, after maybe some struggles, is this maybe where the wheels start to come off a bit? So I think he's brought the wheels back on. And I think that's the most, what I'm taking from these 2 wins is that I think there was a lot of people talking about, should Troy Lesesne's job be on the line? Should he be on the hot seat? Has he lost the locker room? This team feels like it's going nowhere. I think this was a game where more about the effort we saw in both the Minnesota game and the Nashville game show that he is able, he still has the locker room. There's still buy-in. There's still people out there who kind of believe in him. And I think he has reassured me that, I think this team still for right now has made the right decision as in coach. So
I feel like I think that was hysterical. I think the Christian Benteke is ruining our offense by being too good at scoring goals with his head was also a bit hysterical. The real situation is, when could this team get some depth? When could this team sign a left back? When could this team get some depth in center back with all the injuries that kept happening? And now we're seeing at the Celtic game they had, that doesn't count because they had a bench of 17 players at the Celtic game. But in Minnesota, they had their first road 8-player bench, I believe, for the season that didn't include 2 goalkeepers. So that's good. Christian Dome at his first assist all year in this game, which is funny, just sort of, I guess, how he's been utilized. I mean, you got to say, like, this is the Christian Dahome coming out party here for DC United. Him coinciding with Martin Rodriguez, 2 players much maligned that are finally starting to have some sort of an impact on the club. So that's good for DC because there have been some moves, but there's not going to be 10 moves. So these players have to contribute at the level they're doing for this team to sneak into the bottom of the playoff race at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I will say about if you want to get into the not so good of the and particularly pointing out Martin Rodriguez, their goal came, of course, the first goal. I guess that was the non-set piece goal, came off a break, a absolute travesty of a breakdown. Other than that, most of the game, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot of chances, not a whole lot of development on the ground. Right now, Minnesota is dealing with the fact that their most electric player, Reynoso, is gone. They haven't had a chance, I guess, to go. I don't think they've gone out and signed a DP yet. They have a young coach. They played very much like pack the back, and DC really could not break them down, and Martin Rodriguez could not break them down. And I think that's the ultimate limitation for me in these past 2 games, despite the 2 wins, despite the fact he was on the field. This is not a guy I think that will be back next year. And I think maybe there was some talk about, should we bring him back? Maybe he's worth it. Maybe he's worth it. I think after this game, I'm firmly in the camp of nope. He might bring some good things. I think his qualities on the ball, I think at least give you a sense of, if you can find somebody that can be that, that calm on the ball, can do those types of things, but can also make that pass that you need, can create that opportunity, can be in at least the 70 to 80% percentile of shot creating actions, then you might have something here. And I think that's ultimately, this game was still very much kind of one note as far as the goals they've scored and the chances. It's still all kind of going through Benteke. And, I think we did see some signs that, in the Nashville game in particular, if I recall correctly, there was some ideas other than just play the ball to Benteke, but they just don't have the talent to do so. So, and I hope that still develops. I hope they don't give up on that and say, well, let's just go back to what works. But yeah.
Also wanted to call out that Pedro Santos had one of his better games of the year. The play in which he dribbled three Minnesota defenders out of the midfield. I'm recalling was something. I think he had. He was 3 out of 4 unsuccessful dribbles. I think the more impressive part was 70% of ground duels, 60% of aerial duels. He was the most fouled and was had the most tackles. So he was just really, really involved. Played a full 90, which for a player of 36 years old on the road is more than you can really ask for. So that was a really great game by him. And probably not a player. Talking about players you bring back, probably not bringing back a 37-year-old Pedro Santos, but still, these are the players that are going to continue to have decent games until we can really reload in the offseason. I think we should bring up too the MLS rule update finally came.
Yes, finally came.
Is that in the rundown?
I don't have it in the rundown, but I have been listening enough that I can recall it.
Go for it.
There is essentially, so now, there are 6 roster slots that you can now fill. There's no more stipulations on who you sign, who you do anything. But you have some options. So you can do 3 full senior DPs, young DPs, doesn't matter. 3 DPs. You can do 3 under 22 initiative players, or you can do 2 full senior DPs, and then you can do 4 U22s plus 2 million. Plus you get 2 million in GAM. So honestly, I think that leads to some interesting questions for this team come the off season. This team is going to have a ton of options as to what to do. They can say goodbye to obviously I think the first case is they're probably going to buy down Matty Pettila. So they're going to have potentially 3 open DP slots, depending on what they do, whether they bring back Christian Benteke, whether they don't, whether they bring back Mateus Click or they don't. So then you have options there. Then of course you still have your 2 U22 slots. You're going to get some international slots back if you say goodbye to Martin Rodriguez, you say goodbye to Christian Dahome. So it's going to be a fascinating, I think, with these new roster rules, with how everything breaks down. I got a question. I mean, not knowing anything, what you are Ali Mackay heading into this offseason. Let's assume, the players we've talked about that are not going to be here. We can pretty much outline it. What do you do? Do you do the 2-4 plus GAM, or do you do the 3 and 3?
I do the 3 and 3. When I look at the impact that both of our DPs have had on the team and how much the team is, how much their absence is noticed, I think you have a chance to pull another impact senior level player, and maybe 2, depending on what you want to do with either Click or Benteke. I think one of them is back no matter what. I don't think you jettison all of your DPs. I think that would be extremely bold to do. I think that this team is, I don't think it's four young DPs away from being a top of the table thing. I think you still want to have a very watchable team. I think you still want to have some draw and some players people know. So that's the way I build it. I think we're still a little bit a ways from that challenge in that way, and then spending big on young players on the bottom of the roster like that, or on the initiatives. What about you? Do you think the other way?
Part of me wants them to do 3 plus 3, the three DPs, 3 U22 slots. You're going to have a whole bunch of GAM coming your way, but part of me also looks at the fact that this team, on the homegrown side, they've got some, young emerging talent that might come good. Teku DiPietro could pick it back up. They still, I think, have an option. I think they have maybe one more option on his contract. This might be his set in the second year of his option. So I look at how does this team have like players in those homegrown slots that are like contributors, like full-time contributors that don't cost against the cap. And I'm looking at a team that, this winter is going to be big. It's going to be crucial. Why not? If you keep Benteke, you pay down Pettila, that gives you one more DP you can go get. So you go theoretically just go grab a number 10. You're already kind of building out sort of a double pivot, sort of holding midfielders with Boris and Matty Pettila. Then you get the extra GAM. You can go out and get a top quality center back, to sort of man the defensive lines. Maybe you stick it out with Bono. Maybe you look to upgrade that position a little bit. And then, you still have a very capable attacker in Stroud. And then you can also then go and fill some attackers with some U22 slots. So that to me kind of like illustrates This team would have a lot more depth. This is a team that has struggled this year with depth. I don't know. It's a convincing case to be able to go out and to really build sort of a rounded roster that can sort of deal with any sort of injury strife and be competitive.
Go ahead. Sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, and then it leaves you open. You have one more year on Benteke's contract, and then you open that slot up again, and you can go find someone else, and maybe then you switch to like a 3-3. So
you mentioned maybe you hold on to Bono one more year. Bono. We have a question from YouTube saying, "Have you heard anything about Miller?" This is from Richard Rolson. "Have you heard anything about Miller? Could he be released?" I will tell you that Tyler Miller was the only goalkeeper not in uniform at the Celtic game, and he's actually Luis Zamudio brought back from loan early. We talked about that could be a number of reasons, mostly because he's not playing at all. But
he was on the bench.
He was on the bench. And I had said, I think a couple episodes now, that my thought was Tyler Miller will be traded here in this offseason or in this window. That's still my thought. The funny thing was that Luis Zamudio got injured in the Celtic game. So if that's the case, and you were to trade him, and I don't know how serious the injury is, he just had to come off. Nathan Crockford could be your backup goalkeeper if you trade Tyler Miller here for. By the way, I'll talk about him later, but he made a penalty save.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I mean, it does. I think the interesting thing, I think one thing that was brought up, I think it was on the Discord, I'm not sure who, was like, what about San Diego? I mean, you're looking at a team that is an expansion team. All things considered, Miller is fairly cheap. He is certainly, MLS starter. Potentially, he could be MLS starter quality. He certainly has started for MLS teams. You're looking at an inexpensive option. They're already spending, I think, the bank on, I think, Sergio Ramos. That's the player? I think that they're not Sergio Ramos.
He's rumored.
There was some, maybe, yeah.
It's a Mexican international, I believe.
Possibly, yeah. You're right.
I forget who though.
Yeah, but they're rumored to be making some big signings, so they're going to need some cap space. So I don't know. Maybe you flip DC, 100, 200 in allocation money next year, or a couple, really maybe even like a couple draft picks. Who knows? And maybe you can convince you can get Miller off to there. He gets kind of a fresh start. I don't know, something for an option.
It was Chucky Lozano. That's
Chucky Lozano. That's right.
Other question: if Dahomey was able to get his green card and was willing to take a lower wage, would you want him back? No, I would not, unless it was a much, much lower wage, and he wouldn't. And I don't think he'll do that. He'll have suitors either here or internationally. He will not be taking a pay cut.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably back to South America would be my guess. He'll be a free agent. Yeah, I don't foresee a path in which he is still here. The only player you might see take a pay cut, maybe a small pay cut, I think Click possibly, if he wants to stay here, if he's enjoying his life in DC and knows the payday is done. But I think also very, very weird possibility that he also won't be back. So interesting. Do we think? Let's get into we've talked a little bit about this now. Official Borisino, official signing from Maccabi Netanya. I think I tried the Google. I tried to get the pronunciation right. Hopefully that's right. Or it's Netanya, I think it's how it's pronounced. Do we think this is the last signing for the team? Is this it?
I think probably. I think it probably is. I'm trying to think. Maybe another center back.
Maybe, and I think I'm not sure, but I'm not sure. My biggest question about you go out and get another center back. So you've got Garrison Tubbs, you've got McVay, you've got. I think for me. It will depend. Is this a team looking to switch to keep Pereira at that right side center back? We didn't really talk about him in the Minnesota win. And I feel like he's worth mentioning. He was excellent, like just fantastic in that role. Almost made me question he saved numerous times. There were breakdowns and he was there recovering to try to save it. But I don't know what this team's plans are. Now that they've got depth, they're not in sort of emergency mode. what is this team going to look like coming into it? I think they might use Leagues Cup to try to figure that out. They might try some different things at Leagues Cup. No chance they win this game, win that tournament. But I think, I think you go out, you beat Atlanta, which you can do because Atlanta right now is literally just selling everything for parts and trying to rebuild, none of whom will be back next year. They're going to be pretty much, I don't think they have any designated players on their roster right now. They just sold Caleb Wiley for $11 million to Chelsea.
So you're telling me that Garth Lagerwey has a blank slate and a big checkbook to build the team next year?
Oh, I'm saying next year he is going like Atlanta. I mean, they could be excellent. They could be fantastic next year. Right now, we're playing them at the perfect time when they literally have nobody.
Right.
So I think it's an opportunity for us to go down, even into Atlanta, which we've beaten them before, and go out and win. I don't know. We'll see. I'll be curious to see what he does in this Leagues Cup, because I think it is an opportunity. And then Santos, you win that Leagues Cup game against Atlanta. Unless Atlanta pulls off the shocks of all shocks, you're probably going through, because Santos is going to win that game, and then Santos is going to probably beat us in DC. And there you go. That's how they got in last time, basically. So, do we have any expectations for Leagues Cup? Do you care about Leagues Cup?
No, not really. No, I don't think so. I think that this team is in a weird spot that typically you either want to win it or you want to give an opportunity to young players to get minutes they don't normally get. But our roster has been so threadbare, that's made up our starting 11 for much of the year. We've been having to play everybody. So it's not really anything new. It's not novel. And to your point, we're not going to win this whole thing. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll obviously watch it. We'll obviously talk about it. I don't have a great deal of interest in it overall. I don't know. What about you? Do you feel differently?
Obviously I want them to try and go for it. I mean, we're not going to have games for a month. They take this break for a reason. This team has been pushed to the brink. We finally have depth right now. I think it's a game that counts. It's still an opportunity. I mean, we're talking about this team potentially wanting to make the playoffs. I mean, this is a team that is going to need to build, reps and minutes for guys like Sheneg, for guys like Baji. They can't, otherwise they're going into, this final stretch of the season where, hey, playoffs are not out of the question. They are still very, very much alive. Those 2 wins kind of have catapulted them back to where it's going to be kind of a scrap to the end as far as the playoffs are concerned. If you can pick up some momentum in these games, maybe you pick up I don't know who you would play in the next round, whether it be a Mexican side or an MLS side. But if you get an MLS side in the round of 16, then boom, maybe you turn a quarterfinal run into something big. So I don't know. I'm not losing sleep if they don't make a big run in it, but I think it's still an opportunity. You went to the Celtic game, and I keep forgetting that. So
I did.
Definitely wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I wanted to go back to, we didn't really talk too much about, but we've talked about him a couple different times. I'm just now realizing that he's signed to a 3.5-year deal with an option. I feel like that's a big bet on a player playing in the Israeli league. And prior to that,
Boris.
Yeah. I think that is a big bet on your ability to identify and scout talent and evaluate talent. And I will give, I think somebody asked me about this move earlier. My friend Nancy asked about it, and she asked what my thoughts on it were. I said, I don't have thoughts. I don't watch a lot of Israeli league, but for right now, I will give Mackay the benefit of the doubt until I throw our under 22 signing. I throw that in a different category. Everything else has been 100%. So I give him a benefit of the doubt until having to prove otherwise. He's so far made very good talent. And that this is fresh identification, right? Like not players that were already kind of around. This is a new choice. So we'll see.
Yeah.
And it's something we need.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that back up. Because I will say, like, if this is a signing that happens, under the Dave Casper regime, we'll say, I'm not sure I am loving this signing again. I thought, well, it's like, okay, well, this team has to be just like crushing it in the Israeli league, right? They're mid-table, they're kind of average. I mean, from all reports we've gotten, he's been a very good player for them. So I think this might be kind of a real test. Is this sort of a new era in signings? Does Mackay have an ability to go in and identify players? We don't have a whole lot on this guy. I've got maybe some FM24 scouting, and I have no FB ref. There's no FB ref on this guy. You look him up, there's nothing because he hasn't played in the league where they've been tracking that. So I think David Schneck's coming in. He played for Sturm Graz, who have won the Austrian league for like the first time. A non Red Bull Salzburg team has won it in 10 years. I'm going to say. So that is like an impressive signing, and it really is, because you're bringing a guy in who's played on a team in the Austrian Bundesliga is not the top league in the world, but it's certainly a league that is competitive, and to have a team be part of a team that ended the the reign of Red Bull is something that's significant. This guy doesn't leap off the page. No. They're really stretching in the bio. They're really stretching a lot of things. So yeah, I would agree with you. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that will. I still see it. I saw it when the announcement happened. They're like, "Oh man, what this is? This is like a same old. This is not interesting, not exciting." I think it's a we'll see.
I mean, yeah, certainly not exciting off the jump. I think there's nothing that. But I think it's the good thing here is. He's not a DP. We're not overspending. It's not like one of those situations where you find a guy that no one else wanted that you paid too much for necessarily. It still could be a miss. We'll see. We got to withhold judgment. But
it is a pretty significant investment. I think it's $2 million is what was reported. $2 million transfer fee.
Inflation, so, man. I think that that's like a million and $1.2 million last year or 3 years ago. I think that might just be the case.
I'll be curious what his salary comes out to be and how. So that's going to determine then. You take that $2 million, you divide it by.
3.5.
3.5. Yeah, I don't know how it all works out. But you take that, you divide it by 3.5, and then you add that to however much his total salary is, and that's his cap hit. So I'll be curious to see what his cap hit's going to be.
If he's a starter, it's not so bad, right? We also got $75,000 in GAM for next year from Toronto for rights of a player we were never going to sign. So money is coming in the door. We're doing all right. But yeah, so it remains to be seen. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. This would seem to say the end for Russell Knaus for next year. We'll see, maybe not, but it looks pretty strongly likely that would be the case.
Yeah, again, season-ending injury for him. I don't know. He's a player. If he's back and if he's healthy, it certainly creates a situation where you're looking at, options for, does he maybe get selected in an expansion draft type situation? I would hate that for him because he's been. I mean, you talk about players who've been here for, the longest time. I mean, this is a guy who's been here for. Yeah, what's at this point when he came 2016, I think is when he came. So I mean, he's been here now 8 years. He's almost been here a decade at this point. So it's really hard to talk about players like that then are suddenly like, oh, I think you're gonna go in the expansion draft. So we'll see what his situation is. I think that's going to be one of the interesting developing stories in this offseason.
I think too, looking at the players that have been brought in, this player, Badji, Schnegg probably the most exciting from as far as upside. We have to again remember where the context and where we are right now is that we are cap constrained still. That is still true. As we shop, we have to remember that we have $7 in our pocket. We can't go crazy. It's a long commitment in this. I also did not like that we gave Badji a 2-year deal with an option year. I feel like that's a lot for a free agent that was playing in the Turkish second division. But again, I'm not making the decisions over here. Let's get into the Celtic game. I'll since there was no video of it other than I think Celtic had a highlight video where they showed all the goals they scored.
Well, I think they had a stream you had to pay €15 for, which is
not worth it. Please don't do that.
I'm not that sicko.
Don't do that at all. So an academy player started this game. Was it Gavin Turner? No, who was it?
Oh shoot! Yeah,
whoever it was, you can look it up. He was. It was extremely obvious that he was an academy player, both in his size and his ability to run. He got tired very quickly. I think the biggest surprise was the sort of confusion around what Birnbaum was going to do. Obviously, he was in the starting lineup. He was in the warm-ups. Did you find it? Who was the?
That's Graham Jones.
Graham Jones. He was in the warm-ups. He was jumping around doing the things he always does before games. He was heading air balls. He was doing all the stuff thinking he was like, oh man, he's gonna do it for a little while. And then they take the kickoff, they pass it back, and then they pass the ball to the linesman, which I didn't realize was on purpose at first. I was like, well, that's inauspicious. And then Birnbaum comes off in the first minute. So that was, cool for him. I'm glad he got to do that. I was hoping that he was actually going to play a little bit, but it then comes out in the press conference afterwards that he's getting a hip replacement in 3 weeks. So maybe not. Maybe don't play. Maybe really just walk it off and be okay. The lineup, the rest of this lineup, I had brought friends. One of who has only been, I think she's been to a couple DC United games, but I was like, it's a friendly, but they're going to definitely play their starters for like at least a half, probably the first half, and then they'll sub it out and then it'll get bad. That is not what happened. That is absolutely not what happened. She wanted to see Benteke. I was like, oh, for sure. Some time. You got 10 minutes at the end. By the way, that was when the team looked the best. Go shock of shocks when Click and Benteke were on the field. They looked actually somewhat dangerous. But Badji gets his first appearance as a DC United player. David Schnegg gets his first appearance as a DC United player. Zamudio has played. That is not his debut, I don't think. Even in a friendly. I think he might have been in a friendly in the past couple of years, like in the Capital Cup type of games.
I feel like he has. Yeah.
No real games, but games. And that when Garay and Hopkins and Fletcher returning from injury, which was great because I really wanted to see Christian Fletcher get a good appearance coming off of a long-term injury. Unfortunately, he carried the ball forward and made a great pass, I believe, to David Schnegg, and then his leg blew up and they had to take him off in the 5th minute, I think it was. I don't know how serious it is. He was very mad. He kicked the ball very hard, or a water bottle or something as he came off. But the funny things that happened there were the sub was for Hayden Sargis, and Hayden Sargis was playing forward for a while, which was amazing. He was playing like right wing for like 10 minutes until they moved him back later. So that was, I'm sure he did not anticipate ever having to do that. Trying to think of other things that really stood out. Luis Zamudio is the thing that stood out. I don't know. They didn't keep track of stats, I think, in this game. He had to have at least 6 saves in the first half. 3 of them full extension diving saves. The 2 goals that he did, I think it was 2, maybe it was 3. I think it was 2 goals that he conceded were defensive breakdowns. One of them, Matai Akambone, should have cleared off the line, and he just kind of froze there. So I don't know. I don't know how big the injury is, but I think we've always heard about him as being this like serious goalkeeping prospect, and his shot stopping was really good. So that's something to keep an eye on. Hopefully, going forward. Trying to think of other players that Peltola actually was one of the players who ran the most and played the hardest throughout the match. I think he was subbed off in like the 70th minute. Let's see, when was he subbed off? 70th minute on the dot. Wow, I'm very smart. He was actually one of the few players that was like really, really committed and didn't really give up, despite the fact that he was playing around players who were not quite with it. Jackson Hopkins, Sargis was playing right wing forward for a little while. Then I think they were like, we can't allow this to continue. This is ridiculous. So Jackson Hopkins changes from his original defensive role back to his glory days as a winger, and he did not have the legs to run that much anymore. And it was a little warm, but it was certainly not that bad. He was walking around the field by the 70th minute, and I was like, they've got to sub him off. They've got to get him off. Why are they doing this? He is also coming back from injury just now, so let's not push it. But no, he stayed in there for I think almost the entire game. Maybe he played the full 90. He really shouldn't have done that. It was quite obvious to anyone watching. I was like, man, he just does not want to be out there anymore. He was trying, I guess. So David Schnegg did not impress a lot. It's hard to say so far early, as he was playing around who he was playing around and what the match itself was.
Yeah, I think, you're looking at the starting lineup, I don't think you can really draw too much. I saw some other people who thought he looked pretty good. So
Yeah, I think that I'm remembering back. Our fans tend to say that about every new player. I think that is the disease that this fan base has. Particularly, I remember, Pirani is the fool's gold that I remember. Like, everyone was like, he looked amazing last year. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah,
it's just that he didn't have good players around him. It's all Wayne Rooney's fault. Actually, he's actually going to be a really creative player next year. Sure, he had the lowest XA and XG of any player in his position in the entire league for the amount of time he played. But next year he'll turn it around. So anyway, yeah, I think he was not dangerous going forward so much. He was kind of playing conservatively. Again, let's wait for these Leagues Cup. He's going to play in these Leagues Cup games against real competition in real competitive matches with actual lineups. So I look forward to seeing what he brings. Baji ran a lot. I think we're very spoiled watching Christian Benteke in the air. Baji was not as dominant because no one is. So no real surprise there, I suppose. Trying to think of any other players who stood out. Nathan Crockford, the fourth string goalkeeper at the moment, came in. I think the first thing he did was get chipped, or just like had to come out. He had to come out to try to save a ball and got dribbled around and they walked it into the net. That was not a great start. Felt bad for him. Right before that, so the first thing he did is have a goal kick, and because there was nothing going on, the camera just zoomed in on his face for a while because there was an injury. So you just saw him like going through it, like thinking like, this is my first time. I'm actually playing again. I'm playing against Celtic in front of all these people. I'm going to have to kick this ball in front of all these people. Am I going to shank it? I better not shank it. I really hope I don't shank it. I'm going to tighten these gloves 7 times, and he finally kicks it and it's fine. But then maybe like a minute later, he gets scored on in a really embarrassing way. Feel bad for him, but he gets an opportunity to save a penalty, and he does. It was not a horrible penalty. It was a decent penalty, sort of like not all the way in the bottom corner, maybe like 3 or 4 feet in towards the middle, but still guessed the right way, full extension. So that was good. I think that's probably all that's really worth talking about, and probably even more so. Aaron Herrera and Benteke got in at the end of the match, which makes sense because they are now training for the All-Star game currently as we speak. So they were not going to get them injured, but I'm glad that they got to play a little bit. And the team looked good in the last 10 minutes. Celtic brought enough players to fully line change, I think, twice. So that was fun. That was fun. I didn't know any players on the Celtic team at all. Not a one.
Yeah, that's a case of the Scottish League and where it is right now in the world of soccer. Again, I think it was seems to be. I was curious, if Schnegg looked the part even in this game, that would be a good sign. Looks like, and if he doesn't, then I think you can't even really say, he's going to be terrible. There's still a lot of time to go. A lot of, he needs to get, reps with the actual first team. I think this was just about going out there, kicking off the rust, making sure he was still get him some minutes, get him some fitness. How long did he play? Did he play?
Schnegg played, I think, 60 minutes. Let me see if I'm right on that too.
So yeah, again, this was just about getting fitness, getting sharpness.
59.
Boom, right on the buck.
I'm almost right there. That's right. I was paying very close attention. I was taking notes. I was not doing any of that.
You're killing it today. So
I am. I think that this team, when you go down to the bottom of the roster, it turns out not extremely competitive. That's not really a surprise. But I was more impressed once the good players got in. I was like, all right, this is the DC United that I know. Garay, he's out of contract at the end of the year, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he's not. He won't be back.
He and Sargis both out of Hayden Sargis are both out of contract.
He will not be back either, for sure. Tubbs continues. I think I made this comment to the friend I was watching with. I was like, Tubbs. Everybody always talks about, or we always talk about, like Tubbs and Donovan Pines having similar sort of types. And I think I was like, one of the types that is also included is that Garrison Tubbs had 3 games, and now all of a sudden looks like he forgot how to soccer. And Donovan Pines would do that sometimes. He'll have a long stretch, and then he'll be like, "What did we see in this guy?" He'll get a national team call up, and then he can't get in the lineup. Garrison Tubbs, since his concussion, has been not anywhere near as dominant the player that he was in the first 3 games. Look at the stats; it bears out. He does not look as composed as he was before. We were, I think, really ready to anoint him. I was like, "Well, you should start him the rest of the year." Like, let's just like he looks great. Let's just roll him out there. But yeah, no, it was. I'm glad they got the match, and I wish they could have been a little bit more competitive for the fans that were there. But Celtic can travel. There was a woman that walked past us from Scotland. She was dying in the humidity and the steep rake of the seats in Audi Field. I looked up the what the stadium looks like in Glasgow, and it is not steep. It is long. So she was probably like, "What in the world is this? Who designed this stadium? They are trying to kill us."
Probably, yeah.
Probably so.
Interesting perspective. I'm glad you're able to go because I don't think we're going to talk about this game at all, and this podcast would have been like 30 minutes and we'd be done.
I think we might be the only podcast talking about this game. Probably. Not really a surprise. I would not be surprised. By the way, DC United website says Tyler Miller was a on-use substitute, but I didn't see him on the bench, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens with Miller. I think that is I think that's an interesting call out with him. So let's shift gears. Let's talk Washington Spirit. I don't think we'll have much analysis. Obviously the U.S. women's team Olympics starting up. Maybe we'll talk a little bit. We got some DC alum on the U.S. team with Griffin Yao and Kevin Paredes are both going to be there. I'll definitely be watching that. I love
me too.
I love supporting those two guys. The women's team. We'll probably talk a little bit. I did watch a little bit of the U.S. women's games. I think what's been positive, and I think there's a lot of, I think the chances they're generating are good. They're not able to finish them or put them away. So that is a concern heading into these games. But I think overall, watching, I think what's been coming out of those games again is the shift. The team looks like they've struggled and then they shift or they change and then they start to look better. And that was certainly not happening, all through Vlatko's time. This team never looked like they were dominant against certain opponents. So I think the Olympics are going to be fun. It should be a fun opportunity to see what Emma Hayes can bring to the team. So that's my analysis. Not going to go in depth. There's other podcasts you can listen to.
Am I going to have to pay for Peacock again? I think is the question that I'm thinking about. Probably the answer is yes now.
I bought the year or whatever for the Premier League. So I
should have been. I didn't. I've been buying monthly. I was like, I don't even watch this. I don't ever open this app ever.
We're living bad time. Let's talk. The Spirit did have a game. They had in this NWSL Liga MX tournament. And I guess, it finally dawned on me. I was like, I remember kind of being like, oh, this is such a good idea. Like, this is such a good way to use the summer. Like, let's, have these games. It's the opposite of what the problem everybody has with Leagues Cup and what it's doing. There's not a whole lot of games. There's not a lot of opportunities. Like, this is an opportunity. Like, MLS, NWSL and Liga MX need to be playing matches against each other. Liga MX is a growing league. This is fun. Like, this is the type of stuff that makes soccer fun. Then the format of the tournament came out. And if you haven't been paying attention, the format is, so you have 5 groups in this tournament. You have to win the group to have a chance to make it to the next round. I have not explored the tiebreakers. I have not done anything, but basically there's a chance you could win your group. You could be the best team in your group, and there will be one team that will not play in the next round, which is, it's dumb. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Like, what I don't understand is, okay, why not just say, okay, winners go to the next round, and then we're just going to do another group. We're just going to do another group. We're just going to do 5 teams. You play each team once, so that's 4 games, and then we're done here. Like, I don't understand it. I don't like. This thing could have been fun. It could have been enjoyable. I don't, for the life of me, understand why they went with this format. So
don't count on NWSL to set up a tournament in a logical way the first time they do it.
Fair enough.
I think that they have a track record now. They're just trying to think about how long the schedule takes to put out. Like, I don't trust them for administrative duties at the moment.
I think the reason they did this is they created this tournament. They're like, well, we need a champion of this tournament. They have these 5 groups. They have all these matches, and they just don't have the time to squeeze it in. I think the one positive thing is, they are traveling. They are going around to other areas. The crowd in Philly for the Chivas game wasn't great. There was a rambunctious, nice little group of fans. But again, that's also a stadium that's very far away. I'll be very curious to see what the crowd's like in Richmond. This is a very soccer savvy town in Richmond that will show out, the Ivy team broke, I think, every W League record as far as attendance goes. I could be wrong about that. I'm sure I'm wrong about that, but I mean, they went out and for that team. So I'll be very curious to see what the crowd's like for that game on the 31st. I will not be able to be there, unfortunately. But
boo. I'll plug the Andy interview that came out last week or on Saturday, I believe. We were talking about the fact, what did she think about playing in Subaru Park and in Richmond? And she was like, honestly, if we're just going to play NWSL teams, like we've played the Red Stars 1,000 times in Bridgeview, like it would be cool. If we're going to play the same teams, playing them in a new location is at least kind of interesting. It's kind of novel. It's like that at least is true. I was expecting the crowd to be better considering all the conversation about Philadelphia's desire for an NWSL team.
Yeah. And I think that there is an aspect of this that is like, let's see what the market interest is. Let's see what else is out there. Not that I think Richmond is at all, in play for an NWSL team. I feel like I should warn Andy. I'm like, look, I mean, this is a stadium that was built in the Woodrow Wilson administration.
I made that joke.
Best.
I made that joke, and she is like, I've played there before. I'm well aware of its limitations. I was like, all right,
this is a stadium that in August will finally have a video scoreboard, and they haven't had one at all. So that's the big news coming in August at City Stadium. I don't know if it'll be. I think they wanted it so bad to be ready for this game. I think maybe that was the idea, and they've run into some. It's in a neighborhood out in Richmond, and there's limitations on crowd, on sound. The
NIMBY, the anti-scoreboard NIMBYs are at it again.
Yeah, so from what I heard, they have to like build the scoreboard like low, like they can't build it where it is, like they can't just like keep it at the same height because the light from the scoreboard will shine into the. I mean, it's like your typical type of things. There's a lot of anyway. We're going off the pace. Let's talk. Washington Spirit Chivas 2-1 victors. Spirit heavily rotating their lineup. I think Sarr came out in the second half. She did not start. Obviously, is Croix Bethune? Is she traveling to France or is she okay? So she won't be here.
The alternates will be in Paris doing training the whole tournament.
Okay, so Croix Bethune not in there. Hal Hirschfeld, I think, also was a alternate as well. Yep. Is that right? So she will not be there. So the starting a lot of rotated players. Chloe Ricketts, I think, got an opportunity. And really made the most of it. I think she was the player who looked the best. I'll forget when Chivas is not, the Liga MX is, I think right now, a very top heavy league. I'll be very curious to see Tigres and how they do in this tournament. And maybe they've already gotten blown out by the NWSL team. Okay. That's not great.
I think so. I think it's just not, it's not what it needs to be yet. I think the competitiveness is not really high there yet. The Spirit started they started two players they signed yesterday as national team like replacements, and with another one on the bench. To your point, Chloe Ricketts gets her first start of the year. Yeah, it was not a game they were taking. Also, Jonah Heraldez came out in the press conference on Friday, basically saying like, don't really care. Looking ahead to Kansas City. At the end of whenever that is, that's what we care about. We'd love to win, blah blah blah, but that's really what we're going on here. So expect to see a similarly rotated lineup. I think keeping Andy Sullivan healthy and safe is probably the best move. She said that she's feeling fine, but I would not I think playing her 20-30 minutes is great. I think giving Ashley Hatch an opportunity to play the 9 and see if she could score is good. She did not in this game. But that's okay. That's fine. But that was I was curious what was going to happen there. When Sarr came on, Hatch moved back to her wing position. So there was that. Trying to think of anything that really stood out. Patron Taylor scores a header off of a corner, I think, I think it's a corner from Ashley Hatch actually. That was something she was doing a lot last year. I think she had like 3 or 4 goals, 3 of them from headers inside the box. So. Good for her there. And Lena Solano basically taps in a ball after I'm trying to think I think it was Ashley Hatch ball over the top to Brittany Ratcliffe. Brittany Ratcliffe does Brittany Ratcliffe, of the players that don't start, she is the one that most deserves to start. And I think that if she gets out of her head, she didn't do it this game, I think, because she knows that she's going to get a lot of minutes. She played 90 here. She's going to get a lot of minutes in this game and the rest of the tournament. if in the NWSL she stops sort of feeling like she's got to score 5 goals in 2 shots every time she plays, I think she'll be even better. But she is a very dangerous player, getting wide, getting the end line, crossing the ball in, and in this occasion, Lena Solano was unmarked inside the 6 and converted. Good for her. She also cramped later. People thought it was an injury, but luckily that was not the case. But yeah, I mean, you called out Chloe Ricketts. Chloe Ricketts had a play where she like dribbled 4 or 5 players.
Yeah, just
sort of running. It was sort of a weird play. It was sort of like a FIFA play. Like it was running against the stream, running against the flow of traffic in a way that you're like, I think you probably could have just passed it there. I don't think you actually like made forward progress in it, but you did it. You definitely did do it. So congrats to you on that.
And she, had I think a wonderful pass, I think to Brittany Radcliffe in that game. And it was a late challenge. I looked at that play and I'm like, I don't know. That's close. That could be a red. Like she's ahead of the play. I think if there's VAR there, I think he gets called. And I don't think I saw the markings for VAR, but I don't think there was VAR in this tournament. But I think if there is VAR, potentially that gets called over, and then that's a red card. But just a really, really awesome line splitting pass. Chloe Ricketts, I think, is a victim of Corey Bethune's rise. And it's still not, it's very clearly not all like, it's not what you get out of when Corey Bethune's come in is like every game it's like she makes a play or she does something that's just unbelievable, or she's like the most dangerous player out there on the field. Chloe Ricketts is not quite there yet. And she looked really good against Chivas USA. Again, I think we're seeing. Sorry, Chivas Guadalajara. Sorry, whoops.
Old brain cell bounced around inside that. Yeah, sorry. Ante Razov was kept off the score sheet, thankfully, in this game.
Chivas de Guadalajara. So at least I can pronounce Guadalajara. Deep cut. We live in a political town. They'll get that. So against Chivas. So I think that's good. She's a player I feel like we've highlighted and we said, she needs minutes. We just found out, I think there was finally a loan, I think, between NWSL and USL Super League, which I think was maybe a big question. I don't know if I'm Fred Brilliant and I am like, hey, we really could use an electric player that not going to have a whole lot of talent. I could use somebody to build around. Why doesn't Chloe Ricketts come play here? She'll get 90 minutes. She'll get full run out, and
she can still play at Audi Field.
Yeah, she can still play at Audi Field. She literally can go to the same training facility. She can go to the same separate locker room. Like literally. No movement. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be interesting to watch is what happens with this now that it's kind of open. And actually, I think USL Super League has kind of been like, oh, we're not looking to compete with NWSL. We're looking to do something different. I feel like this is like, I really do feel like USL Super League's like, look, we're going to say we're going to be D1. So we get a bunch of people that are going to dump a bunch of money into it because we want to be D1. And then eventually we're going to realize, nope, we actually are just going to be kind of go back down to D2.
They're just building the pyramid. Although the big sort of rumor that came out, and it was squashed, but TBD, was that MLS has made, or there is an outstanding bid by MLS to buy both NWSL and NPSL. Not USL Super League, but the other women's league.
Yeah, WPS, I think it is. Yeah,
WPS. There was some, I think, follow up on that, and they said that there's no truth to that. But that's the leagues both saying that they would say that. So watch the space. It would be interesting to see this happen. It would not be too big of a surprise. I think MLS could probably afford to do this without really, sweating.
I think here's what I'll say about that. I think. Let's say, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe there was an offer. Maybe there was talk about that. The league was at the time. That would have
been the time to buy a distressed asset.
Yeah. Struggling. There was then again, leading up into the COVID year, all the issues that were going on internally, there's still issues going on, even though it's just like, there's still times where people like just leave and you're like, what happened? And like, no one's saying anything. So, it's still some things that are happening. I think it's at least being found out and it's being dealt with rather than kind of swept under the rug. So I think that's been a positive step in a way. But right now you just had didn't Angel City, they just sold for like I think it was like double the cost of whatever. It was much more than what was paid for the Spirit. So I feel like everything's kind of rising with this league. Every like fees, everything in women's sports in general. With what's been going on with Caitlin Clark and the WNBA, interest is growing sort of across the board. And so I don't see a scenario in which the owners say right now, like, oh, we have to sell now.
It would be very short-sighted to sell at this moment. I agree with that. Also sold to Bob Iger too. Remember that is like the wildest. I'm wondering if there's going to be like activations like Disneyland. There's going to be Christian Press is on like a ride or something.
Does
like
Disney still have a relationship with Apple? Is that still a thing, or is that
I don't
done?
think so. I think it's done.
Okay, all right. I thought they still had. That would be you talk about
Pixar
Apple
thing?
TV. Yeah, I think maybe I was thinking maybe through Pixar, but I don't know. It was like Apple TV might swoop in, but because I actually had a friend I was talking with. I was like, oh yeah, they ended up selling. It's like he's like, oh well, like what is it? What service is it on? I'm like, well, it's kind of. He started looking at the service. And he's like, oh god, this is awful. Like this is terrible. Like why would you like? And it's like everybody. There's drawbacks to everything, man.
Yep. No one's ever fully happy.
All right. But I think anything else about the Spirit Chivas game, I think it's, this is still a good team overall. They have a lot of depth. I think it's going to be interesting. I think building some minutes for those players while they have some players absent. I just hope, players that are on international break stay healthy. Gabby Carl, I think she's now going to play. She got the full call up. So just everybody just stay healthy, please. Let's just get through the tournaments and hopefully everything's good and golden. I
did want to say that this team with 1 million subs still roughly looked like the Spirit, which is always a question. It was once you take out the United Spirits, like what does this team look like? They're playing pretty much like they want to play. So I think that is very much driven by the coach's philosophy about interchangeability and flexibility and tactical adjustments. So I think it wasn't a super exciting game, but when they were moving the ball, they did so pretty well.
Yeah, I'll be interesting to see. They've got Gotham coming up, I believe on Sunday, and then they of course got the game against the Red Stars. So again, the game against Gotham will be back at Subaru Park, so no extra travel, but maybe that's a good thing. And then they'll have the Red Stars in the final group stage game. By the way, we should also, we should talk about, this is the last time I'll bring up the sort of weirdness of this tournament. So again, the semifinals will be August 6th. They'll be at the KC Stadium. And then the final will not be till October 25th. So just weird.
Keeping the momentum, interest.
Weird. And I guess I don't know, I have to look back at when maybe they just ran out of time. That's probably why they also couldn't do a full tournament. I'm like, that's fine. Well, then just play a freaking play a knockout tournament. Like, who cares? Like, just play a knockout tournament. Anyway. All right. But, again, I want them to do this again. Just maybe do a little bit of a better job, please. This stuff is fun.
Yep.
All right. I think that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for listening. TBD, I guess, on next week for a show. I've got some other traveling I'll be doing, so maybe we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, we've got
we'll do a call-in show, and it'll just be me talking to people who call in. Who knows? Go. Let us know if that's something that interests you. Maybe we can swing that.
Yeah. All right. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. Patreon.com/RFKFreeze if you want to join the show, and maybe that'll be an inside track to being on the call-in show that John is tweeting.
Maybe,
but join in. We also appreciate the support. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll catch you guys next week. Vamos.